Hello, everyone. Welcome to Plattwoods Church. For those of you here in the room, those of you worshiping with us online, my name is Evie Martin. I'm the lead pastor here. It is good to be worshiping together with you today. Last week, not this past week, but the week before, I got to spend the better part of that week with a group of Methodist pastors. Every person's dream, right? Learning and growing together in Galveston, Texas. This is a group that I've been a part of for almost 3 years now as part of my professional development as your pastor. And we've met in various cities across the country during that time. So Galveston seemed like an odd choice at first, but it turned out to be a meaningful backdrop for many of our conversations. It's a city that was practically the Wall Street of the South in the late 1800s, booming and growing and attracting finance and families of means. But a huge fire and 2 catastrophic hurricanes over the course of 25 years kept it rebuilding, bouncing back, redefining, reinventing itself. And some in our group drew parallels to the life of the church over these last few years, but maybe that's a little extreme. I don't know, maybe not. It was an interesting backdrop for modern conversations, and yet it was also a challenge to imagine the reality of those earlier events, those catastrophes and evolutions of a century ago. It was hard to imagine those today in real life. They seemed so long ago, so distant, so irrelevant to modern circumstances. And the very real spring break vibe of all the shrimp shacks and the bike rentals and flashing carnival lights as I walked seaside towards the touristy pier. None of that old story of Galveston seemed to have any bearing on my real life in that moment until I looked down and realized that I was walking on top of the seawall. The 15-foot barrier, now a footpath, constructed after 1900 to protect Galvestonians from ever suffering a catastrophe like the hurricane they had just endured. And suddenly, my pathway brought that distant past into clear focus in the present moment, in my real life, right under my feet. I wonder if we don't struggle with a similar disconnect with the Bible sometimes. Even more so as the story reaches to us across a much wider gap of history. These things that happened, the people we encounter, Jesus himself can be fascinating to us, but hard to relate to in our real life sometimes. What part of this ancient story is still here in a real way? Where's the seawall that we're walking on that suddenly draws the story and our real lives together? This series, Jesus in Real Life, is intended to help us find our seawall. Each week we are exploring Jesus' words about himself from the Gospel of John. He's trying in many different ways to give people a handhold to his identity. He wants them to experience his divinity, the presence of God through him in a very real, everyday way. So he says things like, I am the light, I am bread, all the words that we've been repeating in the intro to the sermon each week. These metaphors had particular meaning in his context for those who heard them for the very first time, but the great beauty of metaphor is that the best ones translate across time and space. And so his I am sayings are gifts to us today too, ways that we can know Jesus in our real life. So today, the saying that we'll dive into is probably the least modern. Out of all of them, we as 21st century Americans, generally speaking, have the least amount of exposure and experience with sheep husbandry. Maybe. I don't know, any shepherds in the room? No shepherds. We can relate to light, to bread, to vines even, but shepherds? I know a farmer or two. But a full-blown shepherd, that's a stretch. And Jesus says, I am the good shepherd. So what are we supposed to do with that? Wouldn't there be a better, more contemporary analogy that we could translate into instead? Could it be more like, I am the good therapist, I'm the good coach, I'm the good guidance counselor? They didn't. It's all contextual, very good. We could make one of those work. We could have a modern metaphor, right? No, we can't. Not really. We're going to have to do the work on this metaphor because there's really nothing else quite like a shepherd. No other image that can pull the full weight of all that Jesus wants us to experience here. The example of a shepherd, of course, assumes the existence of what? Sheep. And guess who the sheep are? It's us. So get ready for some honesty today. Let's dive in to Jesus as shepherd. I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. When the hired hand sees the wolf coming, he leaves the sheep and runs away. That's because he isn't the shepherd. The sheep aren't really his. So the wolf attacks the sheep and scatters them. He's only a hired hand, and the sheep don't matter to him. I am the good shepherd. I know my own sheep, and they know me, just as the Father knows me, and I know the Father. I give up my life for the sheep. I have other sheep that don't belong to this sheep pen. I must lead them too. They will listen to my voice, and there will be one flock with one shepherd. Twice, he says it. Twice in 3 verses. I am the good shepherd. Now, for his first listeners, Jesus is simply invoking the most popular playlist of the times. He is singing the song that everyone already knows, and he's appealing to collective pop culture. I observed the modern-day equivalent of this just last weekend. I got to go see Trevor Noah, formerly of The Daily Show, on his tour Off the Record. I was in St. Louis there with some friends. If you're not familiar with his comedy, he is masterful at capturing the idiosyncrasies and particularities of different cultural groups in ways that both pokes fun at, but also celebrates our uniqueness and diversity. So he was making an observation about a particular cultural group in the United States who have an uncanny collective ability to do this. Sweet Caroline. You got it. You got it. You know the cultural playlist. It is imprinted upon you, and you cannot help yourselves. Jesus was doing the very same thing. He was invoking every image of shepherds and sheep that his listeners would have known by heart. They didn't even have to think about it. Their songs were reflexive. You even know some of them. Psalm 23, the Lord is I shall not want. Less familiar, but in Ezekiel chapter 34, for this is what the sovereign Lord says, I myself will search for my sheep and look after them. As a shepherd looks after his scattered flock when he is with them, so I will look after my sheep. Isaiah chapter 40, like a shepherd, God will tend the flock. He will gather lambs in his arms and lift them onto his lap. When Jesus says, I am the good shepherd, he invokes the Hebrew sheep playlist that everybody knew. Their story is centered around a God who has shown up in songs and prophecy already as a shepherd. It's a role that they see around them on the outskirts of towns, and it's a role that God has already taken for them. So Jesus makes it familiar again and puts his own face on the metaphor for them. Okay, so you know this means we have to do Sweet Caroline again, but we're talking about sheep, so what are we going to sing? You got it. Let's do it. Sweet Caroline, ba, ba, ba. I mean, how can you resist? It's too much. It's too much. And, it's daylight savings time. All the rules are off today. Okay. To understand this metaphor of the shepherd in modern terms, we need to know also something of sheep. Something that first century Palestinians would have known without explanation, but we don't live around a lot of sheep, so we need to think about it a little bit. Sheep don't see very well. They're pretty close to blind. So getting around can be a challenge. They run into things. They wander off. They fall into ditches and off of cliffs. So it makes sense that they are herd animals. They are safer when they are with lots of other sheep. Except sheep are also not terribly intelligent. They don't always do what is safest. They're pretty focused on grass. There's not a whole lot more they see of value in the world. But sometimes they insist on their own way of getting their grass. They do their own thing, they go their own way, they be their own selves, usually to their own peril. Really, I think only the internet can capture the inanity of sheep, so just check this one out. Sheep are not bright. We are the sheep. I am not trying to tell you we are all dumb. This is simply the gospel of Jesus Christ. What I love about the sheep and the ditch is just how painfully obvious it is that that's our story. We laugh not because it's funny, but because we know it. We know the ditches into which we've fallen or flung ourselves. We each have our own, and they are unique to us as individual sheep. And we also know, as the years pass and as our circumstances change, that however many times we get hauled out of the ditch, there is not some new ditch we discover and plummet into. We go right back into the same dang ditch. If we're stuck in a ditch that feels a lot like anxiety or fear, but then we find our feet on solid ground again, we don't move on and fall into a new ditch of arrogance and egoism or overindulgence and greed. No, our ditch is our ditch, and we will circle back to it time and time again throughout our lives, whether we like it or not. Our addictions remain with us even after we conquer them. Our temptations come back to us over and over. It might look like a different ditch. We may think that we can leap over it on our own this time. It's the same one. We're smarter this time. We've got this. We'll fall in it again. We might even dive headlong into it. And while it's funny to watch the sheep do it, it's less funny to do it ourselves. It doesn't actually mean we're dumb. It just means we're human. And like sheep, we're not meant to run around a world full of ditches by ourselves and without any help. We're going to try because we're headstrong and we really want to believe that we can do it on our own. But that's why Jesus' statement, the one they needed to hear then and the one we need to hear today, is, I am the good shepherd. It has nothing whatsoever to do with whether or not we are good sheep. Sheep are sheep. No matter how hard we try and get better and stumble again and get better, we won't ever not be sheep. And that's not to make us feel hopeless or worthless. It's to give us some compassion for ourselves. Because Jesus gives us that compassion. The good news for us is not that we can save ourselves. The good news is that we have a shepherd who is good. A shepherd who will follow us into every ditch and pull us out by our legs. A shepherd who won't tire of our shenanigans, but will come after us when we follow the ends of our noses to grass that we think will be better, but then takes us away from the herd. A shepherd who never stands by watching and waiting for us to get ourselves unstuck, but who prods and guides and nudges us to move where we need to go. Jesus says, I am the good shepherd. There are also bad shepherds, he says. There are plenty of shepherds or forces in this world posing as shepherds that will abandon us at the first sign of trouble. He says, when the hired hand sees the wolf coming, he leaves the sheep and runs away. That's because he isn't the shepherd. The sheep aren't really his. So the wolf attacks the sheep and scatters them. He's only a hired hand, and the sheep don't matter to him. Where is your bank account when you fall into the ditch? And how many times is it going to bail you out? Where are our politicians when the wolf that is trauma jumps into the pen to attack the sheep? Netflix and movies and self-help celebrity gurus and substances that dull the pain aren't taking a chance on you when the going gets tough. You do not matter to them. Even friends or family who we love and trust don't always stick around to protect and defend when we find ourselves in our deepest trouble. A bad shepherd isn't looking out for the sheep, he's looking out for himself. And it's not to say that no one can be trusted or be kind or loving. It is to say that we're all sheep. A sheep can't be a shepherd. There is only one good shepherd. And a good shepherd, Jesus says, knows his sheep and is known by his sheep. I think this is the most affectionate of the I am sayings of Jesus. It expresses the intimate and personal connection Jesus has with us. Light and bread and vines and gates, those are all inanimate. They are useful, but they cannot know or be known. But the good shepherd knows his sheep. Jesus knows what is in us, what hurts us, what tempts us, what brings us joy and contentment. In a world where humans long to be fully known and accepted and loved, and at the very same time are terrified of being truly known and seen for who they are, it can be a little intimidating to step closer to this image of Jesus as our good shepherd who knows us. We want to believe that. We want to receive this gift of being fully known. We want to experience that true belonging in his sheep pen. But it is also a hard gift to receive. What if that true belonging is too good to be true? What if the fourth time we dive into the same ditch is one time too many? What if we wander too far from the herd and he forgets about us? What if he decides at long last that he just can't stand the smell of sheep anymore? All valid questions of a normal shepherd. But all we can do is take Jesus at his word when he says he's not a normal one. He's a good one. And here is where Jesus moves past the realm of metaphor. He says, I give up my life for the sheep. That's not what shepherds do. Not normal ones, not hypothetical ones, not even good ones in real life. The shepherd isn't going to put himself in danger for the sheep. He may care for them and work hard for them and persist in rescuing them, but lay down his life for them? No. Jesus has pushed past the boundary of the metaphor now to make the point that there is nothing, no amount of nonsense or failure or wandering or screwing up on our part that is going to run him off, that cancels out our belonging inside God's love for us. When Jesus is the shepherd, he will lay down his life for the sheep. That's you. That's me. That's all the sheep here in this pen. That's the sheep that have wandered off from God, some who don't believe they belong, some you may know and love. It's the sheep who are out there stuck in a ditch today. It's the sheep who aren't yet in any pen. As God speaks to us this week through the words of Jesus, I am the good shepherd. Maybe this old metaphor beyond our time and culture has something yet for you to hold. In your real life, as you leave church today, as you wake up tomorrow, as you maneuver through the days ahead, take a look at your sheepiness and embrace it. Laugh at it if you need to. We are humorous creatures. Cry about it when it seems helpless and hard. And then maybe just nibble on some grass. Enjoy what your shepherd has provided for you. Look around at your herd, appreciate their smelliness, and have grace for their ditch jumping too. Stay close to the ones who help you follow the shepherd. And then finally, as simple as it may seem, I don't think we say it enough, just let the shepherd take care of you. He promises that he will. So let him drag you out of a ditch if you need it. Let him wrap you back into the fold. Let him tend to your wounds and be gentle with yourself, because the God who made you is gentle with you. Rest in a care and a love that doesn't depend on your goodness as a sheep, because the shepherd is the one who is good. Will you pray with me? God, my shepherd, I don't need a thing. You have laid me down in lush meadows. You find me quiet pools to drink from. True to your word, you let me catch my breath and send me in the right direction. Even when the way goes through the dark valley, I'm not afraid when you walk at my side. Your trusty shepherd's crook makes me feel secure. You serve me a 6-course dinner right in front of my enemies. You revive my drooping head. My cup brims with blessing. Your beauty and love chase after me every day of my life. I am back home in the house of God for the rest of my life. Amen.